So what is this current stock rally in Chinese internet names all about? As you can see here in yellow, that's the K-Web, that's from Crane Shares. I've got sometimes Brandon Aon here on the channel, contributed or consisting of names such as Alibaba, Tencent, all of the big names, also some NIO in there, and all of those Chinese tech names on a year-to-date performance, closing up to the SPY, so the S&P 500, which is the benchmark out there because it's quite hard to beat the S&P 500 as an investor. Many hedge funds are actually quite miserable at this. And so K-Web right now, as you can see with this recent rally, is already outperforming the NASDAQ. So that's the US technology names, the QQQ, and certainly outperforming, ARK Invest here with the RKK funds. So what is this all about? Of course, this is about a perceived shift in COVID policies. And today we got a major big sign again, in my point of view, which is this tweet by Xi Jinping. He's tweeting, "I'm personally prepared to be infected with COVID-19. I'm 62 years old and I'm willing to bear the risk of 0.025% of severity rate." So that's coming from a sort of official government account, because this is not coming from somebody, but here is a Chinese journalist and former editor-in-chief and party secretary of the conservative popular media Global Times, a tabloid under the auspices of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. So this guy has been pretty much a China hawk, if you will. So he's been very, very conservative in his views, pretty provocative sometimes from his from a Western perspective, I should say. And yeah, he's kind of conservative. He's an older guy. I think he's now retired, if I'm correct. But anyways, the fact that he's tweeting that out publicly underscores again what I've mentioned before in my previous tweets and on these videos. So once again, when the protests in China broke out, I said that this may help to establish a new narrative that negative public health outcomes in terms of possibly people getting infected with the virus, possibly hospitals overwhelmed and so on, are the public's choice and not longer the responsibility of the government. Now that's possibly a difficult thing to understand, because most Western viewers and commentators would possibly look at these protests and say, this is really a danger for the Chinese government, right? This certainly riots happening. There are protests in major cities, and I've outlined it's from the working class up to very affluent people in Shanghai. So this is a broad movement, also both online as well as offline. And I've been arguing that this actually helps the Chinese government with their pivot in zero COVID policy. And that is due to the fact that actually so far Beijing has invested so much political capital into the success of the zero COVID policy, which frankly worked in the first months after the pandemic broke out, when they closed and locked down Wuhan. And so there was, much damage has been prevented by that. And then many Chinese have been living a unaffected life for quite some time, not even having to wear masks or have COVID passports or something like this, which we all endured in the West. And frankly, we had also longer lockdowns, for example, in Germany than most Chinese cities. Many Chinese cities, in fact, have never been locked down until today. So there was a time when this really worked until Omicron came around. And at some point in time, those cases flared up. We had the issue with Shanghai. And still, Beijing consistently kept on going with this policy of lives first and preventing any death from happening. And this is actually internally a big success for them, to be honest, with their population. And this is also what many do not understand about China. There's a very, very large support from the public, and they're kind of invested in this policy too. Some of the breakouts around the Foxconn factory were also, of course, triggered by zero COVID in a way, but it's not entirely targeted against the zero COVID policies, but also, in fact, they are demanding that people are better tested and that they are not mixed between workers of those infected and those who are not. And so, of course, there's lots of complications around also with the health codes and PCR testing and stuff. And ultimately, it's affecting the livelihoods of the people. And so what Beijing kind of needs is this new narrative that I also pointed out here once again, that it is on the people's responsibility to take care of their own personal health. And now it's being displayed on, for example, here the Guangzhou Tower. And you have those public opinion makers, even from the conservative side now, like this journalist here, weighing in, communicating that one outside, but surely also through articles and narratives within the inside. And so that will be important. It will take time. And therefore, I do expect that China will still stick to the zero COVID policy for some time and try to prevent any flare-up and outbreak as long as that's possible, until more people in China have changed their mind, like Xi Jinping here, in a way that they are willing to get infected, because frankly, so far that's not the case. And so you may have the issue of overwhelmed hospitals. You may have the issue with severe cases. You may have the issues with spiking death numbers. And therefore, that's something which is actually the larger danger to the Chinese government, if that would be the case, in comparison to protests on the street. But now that both things kind of come together, this has started this process, which will be, in my point of view, 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, in order from time to time more people get exposure to the virus, more people are reading those articles that I've pointed out on Twitter and on our Patreon network, that talking about the severity of the cases, talking about the effects on the economy. And now that Beijing also launched a new initiative to vaccine the elderlies, that hopefully is now landing on more willingness of the elderlies to actually get the shot. Those that are vulnerable really should do so. And this also leads me to one aspect which I might land in hell here and get a YouTube strike talking about this stuff. But there's always this argument that China cannot open and is failing because they're not importing mRNA vaccines. But if you look at this data here, that's actually data by the Hong Kong government. So this is official data. You can go to the website and look it up. This is for each of the months recorded, and it's comparing CoronaVac, so that's Sinovac, the Chinese vaccine, and actually not the best one, which they have different kind of vaccines, and that's maybe the one with the least efficiency, versus Comirnaty, so that's the mRNA vaccine, the Pfizer and BioNTech and so on. And what you can see here are case fatality rates. So that means from an infection to how many people are actually dying by age group. So you can see here, let's say in the age group 30 to 39, where I'm in, it's generally, as an unvaccinated, 0.05% of people are dying that get infected. And well, you can see certainly that with every dose, additionally, like 3 doses, the fatality rate is going down 0.01% here. And that's interesting for both CoronaVac as well as for the mRNA vaccine. So this is pretty similar in the outcome here. Note, I know there are studies which saying like how mRNA is better at preventing infection and having less severe symptoms. That's not what this real world case data is looking at here. Instead, this is just a binary outcome, if you will. People die or they don't die. It's not talking about like, will they get long COVID? Will they get infected? Will they get a severe disease or not? No, it's just about people dying or not dying. So if you want to prevent deaths, basically the assumption here is that 3 doses of both the Chinese vaccine as well as Western vaccines is getting the job done. Also in the older age group, so of course, let's look at 80 plus. Here, unvaccinated have a 15% case fatality rate, so that's quite high. So these people in that age group should certainly at least get 1 shot. Then it's limited down to 3.5%, or for 3 shots, 1%. So, and once again, here between CoronaVac and the mRNA vaccine, it's a slight, very, very tiny difference actually. So I would argue that mRNA has simply a little bit better of marketing and lobby work done here. The Chinese vaccines aren't as efficient and as great as the Western ones, that's for sure, but they do get this job done if you simply want to prevent deaths. And so the job for Beijing is simply to get those people taking up the vaccine, where certainly there is a hesitancy to do so. So ultimately, with the cases rising right now, I would say that this should also put more pressure on those elderly, because there are simply too many people in China in the older age groups that are not having at least 3 shots. And as Beijing is reporting now, setting new KPIs, that by the end of January they want 90% of the people in the age group over 80 vaccinated. That's simply what they need to do in order to get rid of all of those COVID zero COVID policies. And frankly, it's just too late, right? And I do think that Beijing still sees zero COVID as a large political success within their country, because they can always frankly say, like, how many people have died in the West versus China, and simply it is not acceptable in China at all to have the same approach than we had in the West. And so this is the conflict there. And so I cannot judge like how fast and in which big of an extent and scope Beijing will get rid of the zero COVID policies. However, the path has now been set and clear and outlined, and as I've shown, supported by like TV tower messages, as well as Chinese KOL, Wang Hong, or those key opinion leaders that are spreading the message. So that's it for now, an update on the situation and an explanation why Chinese stocks are currently rallying. Let me know your comments down below. Thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next video.